Remember what we said about what would happen if the Minnesota Wild lost one of the games this week? Yeah, you're right back where you started before the road trip last week. The Wild let one go against the Nashville Predators here tonight. We'll talk about what it means for their playoff chances, as well as what to expect in the final game before the All-Star break. All coming up on tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Let's lock in and fire it up.
You are Locked On Wild Postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? The Minnesota Wild lose 3-2 to the Nashville Predators and squander another opportunity to beat a team in front of them in the postseason picture. And I just want to lead off with this because it is pretty on point for what we have continued to see for a team that continues to insist that they are very much in the postseason picture. Michael Russo dropping this gem here today after the game. The Minnesota Wild have now lost 6 consecutive division games since December 30th to Winnipeg, Dallas, Arizona, and Nashville by a combined score of 27-8. That does not, to me, say playoff team. That does not signify a postseason team to me. Yes, it's great that the Wild are able to, for the most part, beat the teams below them in the postseason standings and occasionally beat teams above them in the postseason standings. But a lot of those have come against Eastern Conference teams. And the Wild just are incapable of consistently beating teams in the West. And guess what? It was exactly what a playoff team does, what Nashville did. They put some great pressure on in the first period. They don't come away with the goal because Filip Gustavsson was absolutely on his game to start. The Wild play better in the second period, take a 1-0 lead, but Nashville, as playoff teams do, prevents them from scoring anything further. So you go into the third period trailing by just 1, and then Nashville scores 2 goals 30 seconds apart. They score again, and they're able to come away with a really gutty win on the road for a Nashville team that had lost 3 out of 4 heading into this game. And guess what? Now the Wild are 6 points out of a playoff spot, and we continue to see this. This is the thing that I think the Wild have been most consistent about this season, is putting together one of those runs where they're like, see, we're right back on track. We're back. We are back in the postseason picture. And then we continue to say, okay, prove it. Prove it by going out and beating a team in the West that's in front of you. They didn't do it against Arizona. They didn't do it tonight against Nashville. I could go on and on and on. And actually, because I'm feeling like it, I'm actually going to, because we have the time and I have the patience to sit through and take a look at this. So let's just look at the last several Western Conference opponents that the Minnesota Wild have played. Nashville tonight, a loss. 0-1. Arizona, a 6-0 loss. 0-2. Home and home to Dallas. Lost both. 4-0 and 7-2. 0-4. Lost to the Calgary Flames 3-1. 0-5. Lost to Winnipeg 4-2 and 3-2. 0-7. You beat Detroit, Boston twice, and Montreal. So the last win that the Wild have against the Western Conference is December 16th, a 2-1 shootout win against the Vancouver Canucks. That is the last win that the Minnesota Wilds have had against the Western Conference. It's not a team that it's a team that wants to insist that they are a playoff contender. They're not. And so, yes, I'll probably continue to play both sides of the fence until the mathematical postseason picture is fully in place and this team gets eliminated from postseason contention. But it's just you can't be a playoff team and squander all of these chances. Play a not great first period. You can't at home. You can't just go through the motions at home in the first period of a game that you absolutely have to have. And just have the mentality of, oh, we'll get them next time. We've got opportunities to play these teams down the stretch. You don't have an infinite amount of opportunities to try to get yourself back into this, and every single game that this team plays is against teams that you have to beat if you're serious about it. It all comes down to just inability to handle adversity. And John Hines talked about attention to detail for the 947,256th time since he's taken over. And these sorts of things continue to be problems. He talked about defending the goal mouth and boxing players out in front of the net. And guess what happened? You didn't do it. And Nashville is able to take advantage with 2 goals in 30 seconds. Power play looked better tonight. The Wild did get on the scorecard thanks to a couple of power play goals, but they weren't able to do anything in 5-on-5 again. And UC Saros has been more inconsistent than the Wild have this season. And they couldn't get anything past him. It was a beatable Nashville team, and yet for the 5 millionth time this season, the Wild are the ones on the wrong end, and they don't seem to be in a position yet to address the urgency. You're now 6 points out of a postseason spot, and look at the teams that you are going to have to try to leapfrog between now and the beginning of this and the end of the season. You have 36 games to play. You have to leapfrog Calgary, Seattle, Arizona, St. Louis, Nashville. You have to make up 6 points in 36 games on these teams just to get yourself in position to make the postseason. And again, that's assuming that these teams like Seattle, like Arizona, St. Louis, Calgary, that's assuming that those teams just go into an absolute tailspin. And you can't account for that. It is incredibly frustrating to just go into this with the mentality of, yeah, we expect that these teams in front of us are going to do us a favor. Guess what? They have not hardly at all this season. And so you can continue until you're blue in the face to say, we'll get them next time. But guess what? At some point, there is no next time. And you run out of chances. And now you're sitting at probably double-digit worth of games that you've squandered this year that are points that you really can't afford to. So, again, credit to Nashville for coming in here and doing what playoff teams do on the road, is just keeping it close, putting yourself in position to make plays, and taking the game over in the third period. I would have been okay with this result if the Wild were the road team, but guess what? They're not. They were playing at home. And you come up short. That felt like one that you really needed to have. And they didn't get it. Now, there's a lot to talk about for tonight's game because we have Zach Bogosian stepping in after Kirill Kaprizov gets elbowed face first into the boards. We've got Brock Faber with an up and down night. We've got Jake Lucchini playing 6 minutes again in this one. So there's a lot to discuss from this game tonight. And so we'll get into all of that as we continue tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Again, the Minnesota Wild squander another opportunity as they fall by a score of 3-2, and in regulation, just get it to overtime and get a point, but they couldn't. And so Nashville picks up 2 huge points to put themselves 6 points ahead of the Minnesota Wild with 36 games to play. We'll talk about all that. We'll take your comments as well as we continue tonight's Locked On Wild postcast after this. Tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are coming down to the wire this weekend, and there is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is incredibly easy to use with the ability to find same-game parlays. If you took the third period over tonight between the Wild and the Predators, you're feeling pretty good about how that turned out because 3 goals by the Predators, 1 by the Minnesota Wild for a grand total of 4. That was your big winner here in tonight's game. You can also find other bets in the Explore tab and put together unbeatable parlays in the Parlay Hub. Maybe you're looking at the AFC and NFC title games this weekend, going with the Detroit Lions, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, or the San Francisco 49ers. You can stack together a winning parlay in the Parlay Hub. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is also brought to you by Indeed. We are driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Folks, my favorite part of Indeed as an employee looking for a new line of work, Indeed will take a look at my qualifications and try to give me a heads up if I may need to clarify something more on my resume when I'm applying for new jobs through Indeed. Indeed tries to connect you to some of those open positions and make sure that your resume is in tip-top shape before you apply. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now to support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, let's get back to it as the Minnesota Wild lose by a score of 3-2 in regulation to the Nashville Predators. And the Wild are now 6 points out of a postseason position, trailing the Nashville Predators by 6 games. Let's get to your comments here for tonight. I sing too much. Is it too late for Creed to attempt to save this season like Creed almost saved the Vikings season? I mean, I want to say yes, but honestly, as somebody who watched the Vikings season unfold, that was kind of not even a low key. That was a funny portion of the season. in which Creed all of a sudden rose back to the surface. And so if the Wild tried something like that, I would give them props for trying it, but I don't think Creed is even going to be enough to pull this team out of whatever's going on. With continued wins against teams below them in the standings, which guess what? There are substantially fewer of those these days. And teams in the Eastern Conference, that's pretty much the remedy against the competition this year, is they can beat the East and they can beat the teams below them in the standings. Beyond that, good luck. Good luck against the teams, especially in the West. I mean, let me just go through this. If you all don't mind, let me just go through this and look at how this team has done against the Eastern Conference this season. So they beat Florida to start the year. Lost to Toronto, beat Montreal. So you're 2-1 at that point. You lost to Columbus in overtime, 2-0-1. Lost to Philadelphia, 2-2-1. Lost to Washington, 3-2 in a shootout, 2-2-2. Then you lost back-to-back games to New Jersey. So you're 2-4-2. You beat New York. You beat the Islanders and the Rangers. So you are 4-4-2. Lost to the Rangers 4-5-2. Lost to Buffalo 4-6-2. Lost to Ottawa 4-6-3. Lost to Toronto 4-6-4. Lost to Detroit 4-7-4. That was it for Eastern Conference teams until losing to Pittsburgh on the 18th, 4-8-4. Then you rattled off 4 straight, 8-8-4 against the Eastern Conference this year. Lost to Tampa Bay, 8-9-4, beat Columbus, 9-9-4, lost to Philadelphia, 9-9-5. Beat the Islanders 10-9-5, lost to Tampa Bay 10-10-5. Then beat Tampa Bay, Carolina, and Washington 13-10-5 against the East this year. That record honestly is worse than I thought. And that's not anything to write home about either. There just is really nothing to write home about with what we've seen so far this season. Bob joining us tonight. Bob, hope you are on the mend and are getting closer to being released. Glad you joined us from the hospital there tonight. Dumpster fire pretty much start to finish. An S the bed Thursday. Yeah, you're right on. Just a disappointing start as the home team, which you really just can't have. But hey, greater good is that if we look at the old Tankathon standings, the Wild are in a dead heat with Montreal tied for 7th and 8th in the Tankathon standings. So you're still in the top 10. Montreal actually won tonight, so they did the Wild a favor by beating the Islanders in regulation. So both teams tied with 47 points, just one back of Buffalo. Buffalo has gone 6-4 in their last 10. The Wild still 4-5-1 in that span. So Buffalo doing us a favor here tonight. B, this has to be the most inconsistent NHL team I've ever seen. It really is just mind-boggling that this team, again, and it's the insistence that they are a postseason, they're a playoff caliber team. All we ask is, okay, if you are a postseason team, beat the teams in front of you in the Western Conference. Let's try looking at how they've done against the Western Conference so far this season. Lost to the Kings, so you're 0-1 right off the bat. You beat the Edmonton Oilers, back when the Edmonton Oilers were rotten awful. So you're 1-1 at that point. You then you lose to the Dallas Stars, so you are 1-2. Lose to Colorado, you're 1-3. Then you beat St. Louis, Nashville, Chicago, Calgary. So you're 5-3 at that point. Then you lose 2 straight. You're 5-5. You beat Seattle 6-5. Then you get 2 shootout wins. You're 8-5 against the West. You lose 3 straight to the Western Conference, 8-8. Then you lose 2 straight to Dallas, 8-10. Lose to Arizona, 8-11, and you lose to Nashville. You're 8-12. Folks, this is an 8-12 team against the Western Conference, the only conference in which the games matter. That does not scream, again, that does not scream postseason to me. Like, if I'm being too negative, just tell me. It does not. I'm just throwing stuff out there. I had somebody on Twitter who said that I was being way too negative about this team when I said this does not scream playoffs. Getting walked in the first period at home against a team that had come in losing 3 of 4. Spot the lie. 8-12 against the Western Conference, and a lot of those are teams that you are directly behind for playoff positioning. And injuries wise, Jared Spurgeon's out for the year, and I know that's a tough blow, but you're basically fully healthy beyond that, and you still are squandering these games. It just does not. It just does not reek of a postseason appearance. It just doesn't. I want to talk about this because this was a big focal point of this game throughout this one. And so Dougie says, I'm sorry, but Kaprizov needs to stand up for himself once in a while. He will continue to get cheap shotted until he turns around and drops the gloves and earns some respect. And I get what Dougie's saying here, but let's not forget that when Kaprizov took the stick checks from behind to Brendan Dillon, he turned around and responded with one in kind to give Dillon the impression of like, cut that out. And we've seen Kaprizov take exception to things like this in the past. I honestly think the reason that he didn't in tonight's game was because he was still trying to collect himself from getting slammed face first into the boards, and Zach Bogosian just got there first. And so Bogosian gets the instigator penalty. I want to be emphatically clear about this. I have zero issue with Zach Bogosian hopping in that instance because, again, we have seen far too many times where something happens to Kirill and nobody does anything about it. And so Bogosian going full Superman in to try to cut that out immediately, that's fine by me in my books. And so I know I believe the Predators, I don't think scored on that power play, but they did score with Bogosian in the box. Cause I think if I had the penalties correct, he got the instigator, but then I think he got a game misconduct too, if I recall. Yes. So that's exactly what happened there. So Bogosian got the instigator, and then because he fought, him and Cole Smith got the fighting majors, and then Bogosian got a misconduct penalty there in the second as well. So while Nashville didn't score on that power play that they got, they did score with Bogosian out of the game. But again, I don't have a problem with Bogosian in that instance jumping in to try to cut that mess out. I just think that he got there first before Kaprizov had the opportunity to, and if I had my face slammed into the boards, it would take me a little while to collect myself as well. So that's kind of my thoughts on that instance in particular as to what happened here tonight. Bryce joining us tonight. How did these guys sweep the Bruins again? I have no idea. It's funny that they played like two of their best games of the season against the Boston Bruins and just have been like win 2 in a row, lose 1, win 3 in a row, lose 2 the entire rest of the season. I sing too much, bringing us our greater good for tonight. Faber had a rough third, but good to see him battle at the end of the game in the scrum. Obviously, that's not the game part of it, but still good to see he has the will to not be afraid. He's jumped into many different things this season and has been not afraid of any part of the on ice, which includes the scrums, which includes the tussles, as I like to call them. Brock Faber hasn't shown any fear in any of that. And yes, I know he had a rough ends to the game, to say the least. But again, Faber has worked up enough credit to where you just build and learn from it. You build off of, just go out and have a better game against the Anaheim Ducks. He's played enough good games for this team and is critical enough of his own performance in those instances to where I don't worry about his ability to bounce back in the slightest after that type of game. It just collectively was a letdown, what we saw against the Predators here tonight. Tracy joining us, not Wild related, but Gallagher hitting the guy in the head tonight better lead to a legit suspension. I saw this on Twitter, and this would be a real good time for Department of Player Safety to do something. Multi-game suspension feels like a pretty solid bet, considering that Will Blackwood got a 3-game suspension for what he did to Marc-Andre Fleury. This feels like more than that, like between 5 and 10. So we'll see if Department of Player Safety is up to the challenge of trying to actually enforce a suspendable play. Let's get to the big news here today. As Tracy points out, the Minnesota Wild did make a trade with the Pittsburgh Penguins today. So there was a move made by the Minnesota Wild, and they went out to Pittsburgh and acquired a defenseman from the Pittsburgh Penguins. And just pulling up the notes here from the Minnesota Wild PR department. Scrolling back to the actual trade. The Minnesota Wild acquiring defenseman Will Butcher from the Penguins in exchange for forward Maxim Chakovich. Butcher owns 7 points in 14 games for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins this season and will report to the Iowa Wild. If you want my take on the situation, I don't think Butcher is going to be somebody that finds his way up to Minnesota. But what that could mean is that somebody in Iowa will be making the trip up, because Butcher has been an AHL guy exclusively over the last couple of seasons. He started in the New Jersey Devils organization and has played a total of something like 100 career NHL games over the parts of a few seasons. Why don't I just pull up the exact numbers instead of just guessing? 275 career NHL games for New Jersey and Buffalo. Butcher has 114 career points, 16 goals, 98 assists in those games. He also has 50 career points in 79 AHL games between Texas and Wilkes-Barre Scranton. And this was Chakovich was the player acquired from the Tampa Bay Lightning in exchange for a 7th-round pick that also came with Pat Maroon. So if I'm reading between the lines here, I think that Butcher is some assistance for the Iowa Wilds, which would lead you to believe maybe Damon Hunt will be making his way back up. That's wishful thinking for me. I just don't think you inject somebody into the mix that has not played an NHL game in 2 seasons. And from the sounds of it, has been getting healthy scratched in the AHL. This screams of a move to help the Iowa Wild with maybe making a call up That would be the best case scenario for this situation, but I don't get the sense that Butcher is going to be somebody who is going to impact the Minnesota Wild himself. He just may make it easier for the Wild to call Damon Hunt back up to fill a defenseman spot. Maybe that means that we are finally getting to the end of the line of the John Merrill experience. Maybe. Wishful thinking on my part. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Butcher situation. I'll look into it a little more and see if I can find anything else. And if I do, we will, of course, have it for you here on Locked On Wild. Hoptics joining us tonight. I honestly wouldn't care about these types of losses if it wasn't for going on a 3-game winning streak and beating 2 of the top teams in the East. They just consistently tease us with these win streaks, and when it seems like we're going to get that wild card spot, they come out and play like this. Hoptics he's saying the thing that pretty much everybody is thinking at this point is it's like you can't claim we're a playoff team without beating teams in the Western Conference. Like, awesome that you've gotten all these wins against Eastern Conference teams, but you're not going to be playing Eastern Conference teams unless you would end up in the Cup final somehow. You got to beat the teams in the West. You got to beat the Colorados, the Dallases, the Winnipegs, the Calgarys, the Nashvilles, the Los Angeles Kings, the St. Louis Blues, the Arizona Coyotes. You haven't beaten more than a couple of times. 8-12 in 20 games against the Western Conference this year. And guess what? You have a lot of games against the Western Conference still on the schedule yet this season. So if you don't consistently beat those teams, you're not going to be in the postseason picture with them. Matthew joining us tonight, just sloppy with the puck all night, forcing passes left and right. Also felt like Maroon was just gliding out there. There were a lot of players that had a similar feel to Pat Maroon tonight. We call them passenger minutes. That's another, like, if you have the Locked On Wild notebook for the things that we consistently talk about with this team, passenger minutes is a key concept for this team, because what it means is players who just are kind of out there, not really impacting the game in any meaningful way. And if we look at what we had here tonight, now look at what the fourth line had for minutes in this one tonight. Brandon Duhaime played 6 minutes, 10 seconds. Freddie Gaudreau played 8 minutes, 6 seconds. Jake Lucchini played 5 minutes, 58 seconds. You also had Pat Maroon with 11 minutes, 50 seconds of ice time. Matt Boldy, not a passenger in tonight's game. He had 5 shots on net in 19 minutes, 11 seconds. He scored a goal. Yes, he was a -2. But again, he was out there firing the puck on the net. Joel Eriksson Ek with a nifty tip-in on a Kirill Kaprizov shot. So he was not a passenger in tonight's game. Marcus Foligno had 5 hits and 2 blocks in 17 minutes, 42 seconds of ice time out there tonight. Ryan Hartman, no statistics in 15:53. Marcus Johansson, no statistics in 15:59. Those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. Is Ryan Hartman and Marcus Johansson should be shooting on net when they're out there. You can't have games where you go through and you don't have a shot. Those are passenger minutes. And so for the Locked On Wild notebook, the key terms for these shows, passenger minutes is one of them. And there were a lot of passengers in tonight's game. Nathan joining us. We are what we are. A middle-of-the-road team, not good enough for a run and not bad enough for a top pick. And until this Minnesota Wild franchise realizes that that's not great, we are doomed to repeat the cycle. Denny Green, for the Arizona Cardinals. The Bears are who we thought they were. The Minnesota Wild are who we thought they were. We let them off the hook. We're not going to let them off the hook here. I do want to shout out the fact that we have listeners joining us across the pond. Always appreciate the support from everywhere on the planet. I think we have had check-ins from pretty much every portion of the globe for these shows. So Locked On Wild International, another reason that we're going to take this show to the moon. And let's just look at some of the other comments here as I start to catch up. Bob, was it Frosty that stood out there looking dumb on the Kaprizov elbow to his head? It took too long for someone to try and lock down the player for the elbow. If you're the closest guy, you throw down. I noticed this in the replay, to be honest, is I think Goligoski is the closest one there and just really doesn't seem to be sure of what's going on out there on the ice. And then you have Bogosian just coming flying in from the other side of the play. And so, again, like I said, I have zero issue with Zach Bogosian. All the penalties that were racked up for that, I have zero issue with him coming in and saying, I'm going to stick up for my guy. In fact, I would welcome more of that from portions of this team. There are guys that will, but it's one of those things that you can't think about. You just have to do. And that's what we saw from Bogosian tonight, is he just jumped in without a moment's thought and was like, yep, you're going to do that to one of our guys. I'm going to put you through the penalty box. So again, big ups for Zach Bogosian. And honestly, I know he's had some up and down play for the Wild this season, but here are the things that I like. Here are the things that I like that we've gotten from Bogosian this year. What he's done tonight, he's shown the propensity to do that when asked to step up and step in for a teammate. He's shown the propensity to do that. And I got to tell you, folks, and this will be something that once the season is done, that I will look back on fondly, is how willing of a mentor he was willing to be for Damon Hunt. Damon Hunt raved about Zach Bogosian when those two were put together on a pairing. And Bogosian was like, I welcome it. I welcome the opportunity to show a young defenseman the ropes, ins and outs of the game. Those are two things that stick with me. And so, we've talked about kind of what this blue line is going to look like next year and beyond. It's for those reasons. If Bill Guerin would say, without a no move contract attached, if he would say we'd like Zach Bogosian back, you would not hear a complaint from me in that regard, because he strikes me as a guy that is a good teammate. And I don't know, with the fact that this team is going to be relying on younger and younger players over these next few seasons, the fact that he steps out as somebody that welcomes the opportunity to do that at this stage in his career, I am all for that. And so huge props to Bogosian for his overall game here tonight. Again, I know the Predators scored while Bogosian was out of the game, but that would be another way to further the fact that Bogosian had a good night here tonight, is the fact that while he was not on the ice, Nashville took advantage and came away with the win. The thing that's frustrating is there just isn't any predictability or pattern with this team. They just constantly tease us with wins and suck us in, only to have a game like this directly after. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Only thing more inconsistent than the Wild is the officiating. Yeah, that was that's a great point. Cinerary joining us tonight. Boldy with an empty goal late, then blows the zone with his fumble mitts. Yeah, that was, I don't know what he was attempting to do on that pass. And so that's not great. Yeah, that's not what you need. If you're going to try to win these games. And the Wild were just overly way too careless with the puck here throughout the course of the night tonight. So collectively, it's an L, but for the greater good, we count these as wins. We count these as wins for the greater good of this team. I do want to talk about this too, because the Los Angeles Kings are in free fall right now. Did you see Doughty was blaming teammates for caring about individual stats? A lot of the Kings fan base speculate that he's referring to Fiala. That Faber trade keeps getting better and better. I've said this for the last couple of weeks. I stand by it. I think straight up Fiala for Faber, without even factoring in Liam Ugrin, I think straight up is a win for the Wild. Faber for Fiala, because Fiala had, I didn't watch the Kings game, the most recent one that they lost to the Buffalo Sabres. All I saw on Twitter was Fiala coughs up the puck in the offensive zone, and Buffalo went down the other end and scored the go-ahead goal. And so Doughty probably talking a little bit about Kevin Fiala, but Pierre-Luc Dubois, I was looking at his numbers the other day. He has 20 points in 48 games, 10 goals and 10 assists. And the Los Angeles Kings gave him a mega deal. And Kevin Fiala's got a massive extension there. Folks, if they keep this up, Todd McClelland is gone at the end of the season at the latest. If they keep this up, he might not make it to the end of the season. And there are insiders and experts that are saying that the Kings have stunk so mightily here recently that they may have to take a step back. They might not be in position to even make the postseason at this point. Cam Talbot has been terrible. Fiala has not been great. He was a -4 against the Sabres. Pierre-Luc Dubois has been mostly garbage. The vibes on that Kings team are atrociously bad. And so I'm personally glad that we plucked Brock Faber from that mess. And it's easy for me to say it's a mess now when the Kings aren't playing like they did at the beginning of the season and when they were one of the best teams in the Western Conference. But that's life in the NHL. Things can change in the blink of an eye. I personally am just glad that the Wild plucked Faber from that situation and have planted him here, where he will likely be for a long, long time. Make Life Count joining us. Sell time for the greater good. We're getting closer. We're getting closer to time to sell. And it's just going to take a few more losses of this type. And let me just lay it out what's coming after the All-Star break. You've got Chicago on the road. Then you have Pittsburgh at home on Friday the 9th. At Vegas on Monday the 12th. At Arizona on Wednesday the 14th. Two Western Conference teams, both in front of you in the playoff picture. Then you play Buffalo at home for a quick little 2-game homestand. Buffalo on Saturday the 17th, then Vancouver on Monday the 19th, and then you're at Winnipeg, at Edmonton, at Seattle. And honestly, if things are muddling around, like let's say you beat Anaheim, beat Chicago, and then squander one to Pittsburgh, or even if you beat Pittsburgh, you've started a 3-game winning streak again, and let's say you just squander that right back by losing to Vegas and Arizona. Then you beat Buffalo, maybe beat Vancouver at home, and then lose to Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Seattle. I think by that point, folks, that will be throwing the towel, because you have run out of opportunities to try to get yourself back in to this playoff picture. And as opposed to simply acknowledging it. You don't have to say it outwardly, but again, I think it's pretty clear that you've got some guys that are playing through injuries on this team. Give them the opportunity to heal and just don't go aggressively full throttle to the end of the season where you could maybe be detrimental to the health of players beyond this season. Folks, the captain is here. Denny is joining us after his appearance on Minnesota Wild Fan Line, which I seeing some of the comments here, I look forward to listening to. But let's continue to navigate through here as we go. Figure skating Freddie, useless. Yeah, again, like just look at the numbers here. Freddie Gaudreau, at least this almost made me throw up in my mouth a bit. Freddie Gaudreau in 8 minutes had more shots than Ryan Hartman and Marcus Johansson combined. 2-0. In fact, Freddie Gaudreau in 8 minutes had more shots than Joel Eriksson Ek, Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, Marcus Johansson, and Pat Maroon combined. Actually, they were tied. 2 from those 6 guys, from those 5 guys, and he only played 8 minutes. Like, again, too many guys at the top that were just not getting it done. KG joining us tonight. I get the fanning on pucks happens, but I'm so over seeing the flops with some of these guys constantly. It was a rough one tonight for sure. I'm kind of at a loss for words. We've seen it be a consistent issue for this team pretty much all season. That you've got a lot of guys that just straight up miss on one-timer opportunities. And the passes aren't really the issue. It's just that either the stick hits the ice first and there's no power on the shot, or guys are hitting it with weird parts of the stick and are pulling it to the right. There just is a lot of accuracy in these one-timers that is just not even remotely close. And then these shots from outside. This team, like we looked at it a few weeks ago, the Wild are missing 30% of their shots. 30% of their shot attempts, which was near the top of the list in the entire NHL. And so you just take 30% of your shot attempts and throw them directly out the window. And not only that, but because of the lack of difficulty on the others, the Wild are having another 30% of their shots blocked because they're coming in low, because they're coming from the outside and there's more time for players to react to get in front to block them. What did Nashville have for blocks tonight as a team? They finished with 15. Okay, so not a ton, but again, like it's just not a great recipe for success if you take your entire 100% of your shots, like right here in front of me, but you take 30% of that and you throw it away. And so now you got 70% of your shots, and you take another 30% of that and you throw it away because those shots are blocked. So now you're lucky if 40% of your entire shot attempts actually get to the net. The accuracy on the shots is a huge problem for this team. And it's not only from far out. The shots in close are a problem too. Like there are so many opportunities right in front of the net or between the face-off circles that miss. You'd think that, and this might be something that players have to double down on in the offseason. Just go sit at a rink and just shoot for an hour, shoot for 2 hours. Overall team accuracy on shots has to be a considerable considerable area of improvement for this team in the offseason. Kevin Fiala does not hit the like button. Don't be Kevin Fiala. Yeah, folks, I'll throw this out here. I would appreciate a like for tonight's video if you enjoy hanging out for these Locked On Wild postcasts. Here's the beauty of it too, is when I am in the comfort of the home studio, because again, I had day job today, so wasn't able to get to the X to cover. But again, because of the powers of the internet, have the ability to be able to cover from home. We can run these postcasts a little longer. And so we've been consistently pushing an hour now with these Locked On Wild postcasts, and just continuing to get a ton of people that hop in and just hang out. We just process what we see, and we try to react to it accordingly. And it's just something that has become almost like a therapy session for what has been a mostly lost season. Denny throwing his hat into the ring to write for Hockey Wilderness. I am honored that you put me down as a reference, and I would be happy to speak, Denny, to your passion as a Minnesota Wild fan, which is something that I think deserves to see those words put to paper. So if they reach out to me to ask about this, I am happy to try to make that happen by just speaking to what you bring to these postcasts, and to Wild Fan Line and to other outlets as well. The passion is the thing that really is something that this state needs more of in terms of coverage, is passionate fandom that isn't afraid to not go with the kind of expected result right now, which is, we're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep fighting for a playoff spot. Like, we see it how it is as a team that just continues to not be able to get it done. Cave Wave Rider. Actually, Rossi was going to jump in, but Bogo got in between them. I will have to go back and look. Probably because I got distracted by seeing Bogosian just flying like a maniac, but that does not surprise me at all about Marco Rossi. One of the smaller stature players on the Minnesota Wild, but I will say this. What Marco Rossi does not have in size, he makes up for and then some with heart and attitude and work ethic and just overall demeanor and mentality of being an NHLer at this point. This quote's going to be ingrained for probably the rest of my life from Marco Rossi this year. I just go to the rink every day and I try to do my best. I will never be able to dispute whatever Marco Rossi does for the rest of his NHL career. I will never be able to dispute that he doesn't give full effort every night. The results may look different from night to night, but I don't doubt, because he has a huge amount of heart, I don't doubt that he is giving 100% every time he's out there. Anybody sees Spurgeon's pregame interview? I don't disagree with any of this. I think that we have kind of seen from this leadership group is it's a group that doesn't really see the urgency. And, I know that soundbite when Bill Guerin first took over is one that continues to play. But like, you ask, what is it all about? And the response is working hard and having fun. And Bill Guerin immediately responds with, no, it's about winning. Like, I just go back to after the St. Louis playoff series. And correct me if I'm wrong here. If I'm being an idiot, just light up the comment section. If what I'm saying here does not have any merit, please just tell me. Like, I value the honesty of this group of listeners. If I'm off base here, please just tell me. But after what happened to the St. Louis Blues 2 seasons ago, in which you lose a playoff series in which you are leading 2-1, and you just kind of get rolled in the final 4 games of that series, 3 games of that series, that would really eat at me as a person. I don't like losing. I feel like that should really eat at you as a player, as a captain, as part of the leadership group of this team. And I just never really got the sense that it did. And so then you see it happen again. It should eat at you double. It should destroy your insides. Like, not able to sleep out of frustration of just seeing another postseason series squandered. Like, the sky was the limit after game 3 of that series, in which the Wild absolutely walked the Dallas Stars. They escorted them out of the Xcel Energy Center 5-1. You turned Jake Ottinger into a pretzel. But what happened the rest of the series? It was the same thing. Team had just a little ounce of success and let it get to their heads. And Dallas said, hey, we got to wake up. We got to wake up. This is unacceptable. We got to go play better and win this series. And what did they do? They won. 2 series in a row like that, let alone 1. 2 series in a row like that? It just seems like the response should have been far sharper than it was. You have to, at bare minimum, lay down the fact that that sort of thing is unacceptable. And I'm not saying that, I'm not disputing that Spurgeon does not do any of these things. But what do we always hear about anytime there's a closed door meeting or anytime any veteran speaks up? It's somebody else. You hear about Matt Zuccarello in the most recent closed door meeting, laying into people and saying enough is enough. Matt Zuccarello is not the captain. So I don't know. And we've seen it this year. Who has been the one that has most consistently stepped up to the microphone? And I know, like, I understand that this is partially not fair to Spurgeon, who has been injured. And a lot of times when you're injured, you are not with the team. So I get that. But who has most consistently, even with Spurgeon in the lineup, who has most consistently stepped up to the microphone to answer questions after rough performances, after losses? Brock Faber or Matt Zuccarello. It seems like those have been the 2 that have most consistently done it after losses this season. And I don't know. It seems like it's a leadership group that just, and I don't know, maybe I'm being weird that I'm irritated by the fact that it doesn't seem like there was enough of a demonstrative response after losing 2 straight postseason series in basically the same way. But this is why we as fans get irritated when guys just kind of look like they're going through the motions, is because it looks to us as though there's a lack of caring going on. And so we like to see people get fired up because it shows that they care. And it just doesn't seem like there's been a ton of that here. After again, 2 straight postseason series in which you had a 2-1 lead and you never got close to winning another game. That should That should just eat at you. And again, not saying that it doesn't, but it should. Minnetonka won 18-0 tonight. Can we call any of them up to the Wild? Might not be far off. So the updated path to the postseason now, 15-3 to get into the postseason. And again, Denny and I are in lockstep here because like you can continue to kind of keep yourself within striking distance. But honestly, I feel as though you would want to win to get yourself in to the postseason position to afford a potential for losing 3 out of 4 or 2 out of 3 so that you have points in the bank. But it's going to get to the point where it's like, okay, we have 10 games left and we have to win all 10 in a row. And you're not going to do that. So again, postseason, like, let's just look at the playoff odds right now for your Minnesota Wilds. The Minnesota Wilds sit right now, and I am not sure if this does not include tonight's game. The Minnesota Wild sit at a 3.4. Oh, actually, it tells me right here. The Minnesota Wild's current playoff odds with their loss tonight to Nashville in regulation, 2.21%. There are only 5 teams with worse playoff odds, and 4 of them have a 0% chance getting into the postseason. The Minnesota Wild have a 2.21% chance of getting to the playoffs. I mean, again, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm being too negative. Like, there's a 98% chance that they don't make it. 98% chance that they don't make it. I actually texted a friend about this. Thank you, Hoptics, for reminding me. Nick Bonino was put on waivers today by the New York Rangers. By the way, who remembers the Nick Bonino tenure? I loved Nick Bonino as a player on this team. He was a third-line center. He was a penalty kill expert. I mean, you don't really have the room to bring him back, but that was one move that I could not have been more on board with as a guy. Like, just he was just a really fun player to watch, similar to my current Brandon Duhaime fan club level enthusiasm. Nick Bonino was right there as well. And so honestly, like, he's probably not the same guy that he was, but you could do a lot worse. Okay, so Denny is confirming that we were correct in tonight's postcast, that Damon Hunt will be back, which is what precipitated the move to get the Butcher from the Pittsburgh Penguins into the mix. I'm very, very happy with that. Very happy with that. So let me just catch up. You may not be ready to give up hope, but it's not realistic. Try looking at things logically. Yeah, I don't think anybody here is debating whether or not this team I don't think anybody here is delusional enough to think that this team has any shot at the postseason. Like the numbers, it's a 2.21% chance of making the postseason. You're going to have a lot go your way. And it just isn't at this point. I talked about this in today's episode when talking about Adam Beckman and his recent hot streak, 4 goals in the last 3 games. Again, look at the numbers tonight. Jake Lucchini played a grand total of 5 minutes, 58 seconds. He had a shot, 2 hits. I would rather see Beckman. I'd rather see Beckman get an opportunity because, he's going to shoot, and this team clearly can use some more of that. So that'd be my preference. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what shakes out after the All-Star break for this team. This is a really good point, too. We all know that if they are going to make the playoffs, they can never lose again. And I'm not sure they hate to lose. It's this one, folks. Like, there just is the urgency just has been frighteningly absent all season. Like, there's been way too many instances of, oh, well, we'll get him the next game. Like, you are running out of, oh, well, we'll get him the next games. And you go through all of this work, all of this effort to put together a 3-game winning streak, and you squander it because you're beating teams in the East. You're beating teams below. You're beating the 5 teams below you in the standings. But again, you go to a game that matters, and you don't win. So 2.21. 2.21 is the number to keep in mind for the rest of the season until it turns to a 0. And I know, we're getting, I'll point out B. Lake. Billy G isn't selling yet until the deadline where he will be forced to sell. This is, we're trying to be realistic about this situation, but ownership, front office, it's still pedal to the metal until the moment that we see the Minnesota Wild have been mathematically eliminated from postseason contention. Then at that point, there may be some looks to the future, but because this team continues to prioritize the muddy middle, which is our goal is to make the postseason no matter what, no matter the cost, until they realize that in order to be a more serious contender that has bigger aspirations than simply playing more games in addition to the 82 regular season games, this is just going to continue to happen. This has been what has happened for this franchise for a long time. The 2 times that this team went on extended postseason runs were seasons that they were not expecting to. But things kind of came together and they were able to go on a run. Every season in which this team is expected to make the postseason, they have been disappointed. And that's because the good teams can understand when a team has hit its ceiling and it can't go any further. And so at that point, then your Colorado Avalanches, your Tampa Bay Lightnings, you can't put the Vegas Golden Knights in there because they traded a bunch of different players to put their franchise together. But the 2 big ones, Colorado and Tampa Bay, those two teams were rotten awful because they realized that the group that they had put together had hit their ceiling. It was not possible for them to push through. And so it's time to try to get a new mix to see if that mix can go any further than the team that you previously had. And so they sold off everything, and they ended up being bad enough to draft Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar in the Avalanche's case, and in the Tampa Bay Lightning case, Steven Stamkos and Andre Vasilevsky. You don't get those types of players unless they just have some weird instance in which they fall in the draft. You don't get those guys at between 15 and 25. Now, credit to Judd Brackett. He has done a good job of drafting where the Wild have picked. But you don't get a Connor Bedard at 15. You don't get a Macklin Celebrini at 22. You just don't. And so not having the stomach to handle seasons of lesser play is something that they're just not going to it's just not something that is ever going to lead to what this team is trying to accomplish. Come on, the A's won 20 in a row. Billy Bean's Moneyball A's. Let's just take a look and see if there are any other comments here before we wrap up for the night. Denny's fan line experience talked about the line combos on fan line and how bad they are. And Walker and Beckman aren't playing. No answer. Again, Beckman, 4 goals in the last 3 games. He's certainly started to heat up. Would be nice to get him an opportunity to just see what he's got at this point. Again, that's kind of what we were all hoping for this season, was an opportunity to see what players in the organization look like. And I know you're not going to float a full roster of rookies out there. And a lot of the guys in the AHL level have, for different stints this year, not really stood out. But this NHL lineup hasn't stood out a ton. They have not stood out a ton so far this year. So I guess you tell me, what's the difference? The difference to me is a rookie player seems to be able to kind of exceed what is expected of them. And a lot of times veteran players are what they are. So this would be a fun story for the rest of the season. As Bob notes, watched Shazi's clip on returning to playing. That would be a great feel-good story the rest of this season and or next year, is getting Shaw back in, who's a fan favorite. That would be great to see. It'd be a nice way to finish off a season in which you're not going to get really anything that you're looking for. I want to finish with this. Freddie asking, 34 games left. How many are wins? So let's just assume, based on where the standings are at right now, Anaheim, Hockey Day, Minnesota, which is a great spectacle, but I think we kind of overblow the Hockey Day, Minnesota record as this mysterious, magical thing, and don't really look at the teams that are on the schedule all that much. Now, again, there have been some really great Hockey Day Minnesota moments. So I actually love Hockey Day Minnesota. So I'm not trying to take away from that. But I can just almost see what's going to happen if the Wild get a win against the Anaheim Ducks on Saturday. Is that we're going to go from squandered opportunity here to trying to go back to for the 80th time, we're back. Again, after beating the Anaheim Ducks, who at last check in the playoff standings, they have a total record of 16-30-2. They have 34 points in the season. They have 11 regulation wins in 48 games. They're 13 points worse than the Wilds. They have been outscored by 43 goals. You name it. It's not great. And so I worry that the overcorrection is going to be, hey, back on track. We got to the All-Star break, and now we need to go on a run. And to start off the post-All-Star break, you play Chicago on the road, a very winnable game. Chicago is not a great team. I worry then that putting 2 games in a row, you'll be like, the narrative will be, you won 2 in a row. Now you got to just go out and beat the Pittsburgh Penguins at home. And even if that happens, you've won 3 games in a row again. Folks, we're back. The Minnesota Wild are back on track. They're back if they can just keep this run going. And then you play Vegas, Arizona on the road. And so I'll give the benefit of the doubt for the 3 games most recently upcoming. I think they'll beat Anaheim. I'll say they beat Chicago. I'll even be optimistic and say they beat Pittsburgh. But good luck on the road against Vegas and Arizona. 2 places that the Wild have struggled against over the last couple of seasons. I think those are both losses. So you're 3-2. You play Buffalo at home. Buffalo is pretty awful. So maybe you win that game. Vancouver is going to be a loss at home. So you are at this point 4-3. At Winnipeg, at Edmonton, at Seattle. Those are all 3 losses. Just right off the top of my head. So now you're 4-6. You play Carolina at home, and because you got lucky in the game at Carolina, I don't think that luck will carry over. And so they're going to lose to Carolina. So you're 4-7 at that point. And then you have at Nashville on the 29th, and then at St. Louis on the 2nd. Those are both probably losses too. Because again, it's Western Conference teams that are in front of you in the postseason picture. And you were 8-12 at this point against the Western Conference. So now you're 4-11. Yeah, you'll beat San Jose. But then you play Arizona and Colorado on the road. And then play Nashville, Arizona, and Anaheim at home. It just, I'm not even trying to be aggressively negative here, but it's just not looking like it's going to be likely. And so then at that point, we move into the trade Capri's bit is back. It's one of my favorite bits. And so now the postcast trade Capri's counter is at 3 games. 3 straight postcasts. Let's make it 4 in a row in Saturday's game. Folks, we've been at this for an hour and 20 minutes. And I think what we have established here is this. Postseason continues to be a Everest style. Oh, it is 4. My fault. 4 games. Trade Capri's. 4 straight postcasts for trade Capri's. So we'll try to make it 5 on Saturday. But here's where I think we leave tonight's postcast. We now have a 2.21% chance at the postseason. And so we are right back where we were 5 games ago, 10 games ago. Is, as Hoptics mentioned, we just continue to get tantalized to just keep people engaged enough. Just keep people curious enough as to what is going on with this team. And then you get a real test and you can't handle it. So you got a winnable game against Anaheim on Saturday, but that does not change the fact that you are on life support for a postseason spot. So we'll see. We'll see what happens on Saturday. Hockey Day Minnesota is going to be fantastic, though. I will be covering the Wild at the X. It's not going to be super feasible to make a 6-hour drive up to War Road and then try to drive back to cover Wild Ducks. So we will cap off Hockey Day Minnesota with the game tomorrow night or Saturday night against Anaheim. We'll have you covered with a postcast after the game as well. Anybody that would like to wish Denny, captain of the comments, a happy birthday on Saturday, swing by Tom Reed's around 5:00 to meet myself. We'll keep it mostly informal. I was trying to get things ironed out for a live show for Saturday, but just continue to I was not getting any of the answers that I needed. And turns out there's a lot more to it than I even thought there was. But I'll be there. Gonna buy Denny a beer. We're going to chat and we're going to talk about why this team continues to be super infuriating. And so if you want to join in on the festivities, stop out at Tom Reed's on Saturday around 5:00 and you can say hello and trade Capri's. So that's what we got going on the schedule. And so we'll see you out at Tom Reed's on Saturday. Otherwise, we'll see you here at Locked On Wild for tomorrow's episode. Oh, by the way, I should mention too, for the PWHL fans in the audience, we have secured a PWHL-centric guest for PWHL coverage. So we'll probably get that rolling next week. An old friend of the show from back in the day. You'll recognize her face when she makes her return appearance. So we'll be getting that ironed out hopefully next week. I'm excited that we are getting some of the audience participation episodes ironed out. We've got a few people that have emailed, and we're getting those ironed out. So if you're one of them, very excited for that. If you have not emailed as of yet, you can send an email to lockedonwild@gmail.com, and we'll get those going. That's, again, huge credit to Denny for driving the bus on that one. That is a fantastic idea, and I'm very excited to allow for more audience participation. Audience participation drives the numbers, and we are just going to continue to take this thing all the way to the top of the tallest mountain here on planet Earth. And then we're going to go to the moon, and then we're going to go to every other planet in the solar system. So if you'd like to be part of the show, email lockedonwilds@gmail.com, and we'll get you in as part of a future episode. Smash that like button. Thank you, everybody, as always, for tuning in to yet another Locked On Wild postcast. And we'll see you for tomorrow's episode as well. And then we'll see you on Saturday if you make it out to join us at Tom Reed's at around 5 on Saturday. Beyond that, that's all I got for you. Locked On Wild is your source of all the Minnesota Wild news and information you can possibly handle. So thank you for continuing to support us here. We'll see you in the next episode. You can get new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.